Welcome to Auto Exotica, and to answer your first question, Flare Yellow. That's the name of this color. The name of the car, the Lexus LC500. Lexus introduced the LC500 a few years ago to replace their previous coupe called the SC. The LC500 stands for Luxury Coupe, and of course 500 horsepower. That last bit's not really true. The 500 stands for the 5-liter V8, which resides under this hood. In the case of the SC, Sport Coupe was a bit of a misnomer. Good cars, not very sporty. In the case of the LC, Luxury Coupe, absolutely no misnomer. This is obviously a coupe and absolutely luxurious. Want to find out? Let's go for a ride. So what really is the LC500? Is it a luxury car? Is it a sports car? Is it mainly a coupe? To my way of thinking, the LC500 is all about style. Take a look at the body. It is stunning. The hood looks so low. The front wheels look like they're pushed out, like they're stretching the sheet metal of the fenders and the quarter panels out. The what is now ubiquitous with Lexus, their huge thimble-shaped grille. Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't like it when it's applied to some of their SUVs, but in this car, that thimble-shaped grille works. The headlights, take a close look at one of those headlight units, that triple beam LED. There's so much going on inside that light housing. It would not be out of place in a museum of modern glass art. All of those details are so beautiful in the way when you shut the car off, walk away from it, the door handles tuck in. And when you unlock the car, the door handle pops out to present itself to you. You walk around at the back, the tail light is an amazing thing. It's got these hockey-shaped LED lights within it that look like they sort of go on to infinity. The wheels on this particular car are optional. They're 21-inch forged wheels, very unique shape. That vertical vent just ahead of the rear wheel well. Air does flow through that, but it looks sharp. It looks so good. And if you get it in this color, this car cannot be missed. It's beautiful. The interior of the LC500 is a wonderful place. The quality of materials everywhere are top shelf. Everything is covered with soft touch, nicely stitched material. The seats are firm but cushioned. These are among the most comfortable car seats I've ever experienced. Top shelf. Everything you touch feels high quality, sturdy. The dashboard has a nice clean look, and it's a bi-level kind of a thing. The multimedia display is set within those two levels. Kudos to Lexus for integrating the screen nicely into the dash. Everything in this interior is wonderfully done. Also wanted to mention the Mark Levinson 13-speaker sound system in here. And there's a CD slot. A lot of cars don't offer that little slot anymore. The console, very, very nice. One thing I would complain about a little bit on the console is this trackpad. Lexus uses this trackpad where other manufacturers tend to use a knob on the console that you turn to go through menus and push to make selections. And I will say, I've driven a few Lexi of late. They have the same trackpad. I found it very frustrating to use until I turned off the haptic feedback, so I'm not getting this little pulse or this vibration on my fingertip when I go from menu to menu or make a selection. I will say that you do get used to it. The gauge cluster is an interesting piece. Nice leather stitched arch over the top of it, but the gauge cluster itself looks sort of laid out in an analog fashion, but it is actually a digital display. And what I find interesting is that tachometer, speedometer dial actually physically slides over a couple of inches, revealing some real estate for some additional information to be displayed. Some of it's useful, some of it's just pure gimmick. One aspect of the interior of the LC500 that you might find suspect is the rear seat. This isn't a two-seater, this is a luxury coupe, so there should be a rear seat. I get that. This rear seat is not useful for human beings. I can't imagine anyone taller than 5'3" or 5'4" being able to sit in that back seat without their head pressed against the ceiling. And by the way, if you are in the back seat and you sit back, what's directly over your head is the rear window. So driving on a nice, beautiful sunny day like this, anybody sitting in that back seat would be cooked. So as I mentioned, the LC500 is Lexus's luxury coupe. Does that mean that it's all about being quiet and riding like a cloud and all of that? Not really. The LC500 is a sporty car. Within the first 15 minutes of driving this car after I picked it up, I said to myself, this would be a fantastic cross-country cruiser. The ride is good. Everything feels so solid. And with that 5-liter V8 under the hood, given the opportunity to open it up a bit, it sounds fantastic and it pulls hard. Each time you start the car, it's in normal drive mode. But there's also Sport, Sport Plus, there's Comfort, there's Eco. The things that change are the steering feel, the throttle response, and the suspension setting. There's also a custom setting. I've set the custom setting to aggressive throttle response, softer suspension setting. Suits me. I'm going to stop right now and just do an example of acceleration, okay? Listen to the engine sound, it's fantastic. It sounds like a Wookiee gargling. It's beautiful. I'm just gonna take my foot off the brake, plant that accelerator to the floor. I've got it in Sport Plus mode right now. Ready? Go. That was satisfying. Now I just left it in drive. You can shift it to manual mode and paddle shift it if you'd like, but that was just left in drive, and it pulls it right up to 7,000 or 7,100 RPM. The red line is 73, so it pulls it right up close to red line in each gear and just pops off a very quick shift. That's sporty for a luxury car. I find it interesting that for a car that Lexus designed to look like a spaceship, they installed an engine that's a bit of a throwback, really. It's a naturally aspirated V8, 5 liters, no turbocharger anywhere, and it's tied to a normal automatic transmission. It's not a dual clutch or anything like that. Not to say it's archaic. I mean, 471 horsepower and 398 pound-feet of torque from 5 liters is pretty good. And it revs very freely. They used very light, high-strength materials for their valve train and the connecting rods, so things move very easily within that engine. And you feel that. It responds very quickly. Now, the transmission does have a manual setting, like so many cars do now, and then you can use these paddle shifters on the steering wheel here. The paddle shifters in this application, I think, makes sense. I can see if I was doing a real twisty road and I had the opportunity to drive somewhat aggressively, paddle shifting this thing might be fun because the transmission does respond fairly quickly to the paddles. And I will say that Lexus did a nice job of making these paddles long, so if your hands are a little above or a little below 3 and 9, you can still access those paddles nicely. Another thing I'll mention as I'm driving this twisty bit of roadway here is that this car, with its performance package, does have active rear wheel steering, and it does help. Now, it's interesting that Lexus does offer a torque vectoring differential in some of their cars. This car, however, does not have that, and it has active rear wheel steering, which actually does turn the rear wheels up to 2 degrees either direction. I noticed it particularly in slow speed cornering, going around a roundabout or in town, a 90-degree corner. You can actually find yourself going, ooh, I almost hit the curb there, if you're not used to it, because it does turn more quickly at low speeds than you think it would. Now at higher speeds, I don't notice it quite as much, but what I will say is that this car feels more agile than I would think it would, because it's not a short car. It's 15.5 feet long, and it's a heavy car. And again, if you keep the revs up, the engine is so responsive to the throttle. Just wonderful. I really like the combination of characteristics of this car. It's a luxury coupe, I get that, but it can also be sporty. This is a car that, given a safe opportunity to let it go a little bit on a nice twisty stretch of road, it can be downright fun. And yet its main character, I think, is as a comfortable, high quality luxury GT car, and it really shines. Well done, Lexus.